Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. My name is Paul, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a liberty machine. Here to talk about some conservative ideas, the senator from District 17, Scott Flippo, is with us. Scott, welcome back, sir.
Paul, thank you very much. I'm happy to be with you all today. Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. I guess, we'd spoken a little bit earlier in the week, and I found our conversation just really intriguing. And we were just kind of talking about big picture conservative stuff, you know what I mean, and big picture limited government stuff. And I just want to say I really appreciate what you had to say, and I'd love for you to share it with our audience,
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. And, I enjoyed the conversation as well. And, it's something that I've spent quite a bit of time, looking at. And naturally, as a legislator and a senator, I focus, primarily on state issues. Now, as a Republican, as a conservative, I also think about, what it means to be a conservative and what are the values and the principles that we're fighting for. First and foremost is we're fighting for freedom and liberty. And, that government doesn't necessarily exist to per se make our lives easier. It exists to protect our freedoms and our liberties and make sure those are not being infringed upon. It's our responsibility, to make sure that we're doing for ourselves, that we're helping out our neighbors and our communities. That's not, some distant government's responsibility. That's our responsibility. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that we had talked about, Paul, was, it was kind of interesting that some of the biggest recipients of federal spending were some of the reddest, most conservative states.
Yeah.
New York and California, those are payers. They're the payers. Arkansas is a taker, along with a lot of other states. It's not just Arkansas. And I think that, as I started looking at that, got me thinking, at which point should we not be having a conversation, not just amongst, other elected officials, but amongst our constituents about, the role of government and what should be the responsibility of the federal government, what should be the responsibility of the state government, and what should be the responsibility of local government.
And that's why I thought it was so intriguing, because it really is big picture stuff. Some people might know, I'm sure some do, that Arkansas, when it comes to the amount of our budget, $20+ billion when you take state and federal spending, so much of that is us taking more than we actually send to Washington, D.C. I mean, some people might know that, but they might not know to what extent. And more importantly, they might not have ever thought that, that this is something that we should work to change.
Absolutely. And I think, Paul, one of the tough things is that when you see spending, reach you directly, or your community, or your county, it's kind of, everybody has that thought of, well, it's about time. We've seen all this money getting thrown away and, just wasted in all these other areas. And finally, some of that hard-earned tax money, hard-spent tax money coming back to me or to my county or my state. And I understand that thought process. Some of the realities is that sometimes we get more than what we're paying up there. And, one of the great things, one of the things that the federal government does is if they can't force a state to do something constitutionally, they open up a checkbook. And they bribe us to do it.
Yeah.
And, the more you take, and the more money you take, the more addicted you become to that money, and the cycle kind of repeats itself. And, a lot of for conservatives, when you talk about your freedom and liberty.
Hey, Scott, you're breaking up just a little bit. So, yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Sitting here, let me know when I get to a good spot.
Okay.
I'm going to move. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. It was just a little bit there, so we kind of missed something. You said something about conservative, so I'm sure it was great.
I don't know. I don't think the Russians are hacking into my phone. I hope not.
Yeah, who knows? NSA too, maybe. Who knows?
But no. Getting to the to conservatism, the things that we're fighting for, and you talk about your freedom and your liberty, and some of that's going to come with hard work and sacrifice, and it's not necessarily about making government making life easier. That's our responsibility. Mm-hmm. Government can be responsible for our national defense, for infrastructure, for fire protection, for police protection. but what about that community center that we want to have that we all want to have in our local communities? Is that people in Delaware need to be funding that, or is that something that we need to be funding at the local level with, maybe some state assistance? And again, this is a conversation that I think is not being had in politics. It's not being had, really, I think, in society at large. And I kind of feel that that's one of the things that I enjoy talking about. And I think that when I visit with my constituents, that it's something that I get feedback on. And that you just can't leave it to government or politicians to think that they're going to solve all the problems. You have to involve citizens. You have to involve your constituents in that.
Yeah, and we're talking with Senator Scott Flippo from District 17. So I'm kind of just thinking here, like you said, so much of this dependency on the federal government, this is affecting a lot of red states, specifically red states in the South. So we have a lot of people who I think are limited government conservatives, but I don't think there's ever been somebody in a position of power or authority to maybe try to articulate, hey, we need to try to change this. And you mentioned sacrifice, and I think that's exactly what this kind of is going to take. Is somebody being able to, this is this we're going to have to do without this. Because this is, with the current level of federal funding, this is a perk, and we may need to get rid of that perk so we can use the money to focus on the things that are necessities that the government does, like roads and things like that.
Exactly. And I don't think that, from a conservative standpoint, that the change that we would like to see is going to come as a result, it's going to come about without any, sacrifice on any level, from a state standpoint, community standpoint, and individual standpoint. I think that it's kind of human nature when, a lot of people say, well, I don't mind sacrificing, but I don't want to be the first one that jumps off the bridge. I'll go last. And it's difficult. It's difficult for people to swallow, I think, a lot of times when, somebody in my position or another a politician comes along and says, you need to sacrifice. And people, they kind of look at you and think, I just read in the paper this morning or saw in the news last night about another group of politicians getting caught with their hands in the cookie jar. I'm working 2 jobs. That the guy would come and tell me that I need to do less, or I need to sacrifice. So, inherently, it's what
hang on, Scott.
In government.
Yeah, we kind of lost you there a little bit. But what I think you said was, we're sitting here talking about sacrifice, and yet you got somebody working 2 jobs, doing right by their family, making ends meet, and yet they read, about this politician that got their hand caught in a cookie jar, taking kickbacks or whatever the case may be, and it's like, well, so why would I not want to? Why would I want to do with less?
Who are you to tell me about? Who are you to tell me that I need to make sacrifices?
Yeah,
and I understand that frustration, and it bothers me when I see elected officials abusing their position, because it reflects upon us everybody that serves an elected office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's a position in which actually citizens put a lot of trust into people that serve an elective office, and we need to be good stewards of that for reasons like this, so we can have intellectually honest conversations with people about the workings of government. And it's important to me that when I visit with my constituents here in District 17, from Mountain Home over to Harrison, and that I don't always expect they're going to agree with me, but at a bottom line, I expect to be able to look them in their eyes and to tell them this is where I was on this issue, or this is why I voted the way that I did, and I did not do it for my own personal gain or benefit, be it financially or politically or any other reason. That I did what I thought was the right thing or the closest to it. And you might disagree with that, but it certainly wasn't for my own self-serving interest.
Mm-hmm. And
that's an important thing for me to do in my position, and it makes serving in office actually a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, again, we're talking with Senator Scott Flippo. I'm sitting here thinking how this, I guess, there's anytime you start talking about a tax increase or the government needing more money, and let's say the people kind of rise up and they say, we don't want any more, then it's like, okay, well, then you're going to have to do without this, and then you're going to have to do without that, and you're going to have to do without this. And they always pick the most valuable things that government does, and they ignore all of these all these little things. And I wonder if conservatives, because that's just dawning on me, Scott, have ever thought the fact that a state like Arkansas, okay, is sending money to the federal government, and they're sending more money back to us than we send to them, how that actually enables government to grow. And if the federal government was keeping a tab, I mean, we would be in a lot of debt. I mean, thankfully they're not, but and then all of a sudden, you come accustomed to a certain standard of living, a certain standard of what you think government is supposed to do. And so in the long run, if we're really talking about limited government, the situation, the status quo is enabling the problem. Would you agree with that? I
would, absolutely. And I think that, government is not just about, having individuals that become addicted to government. It's you have states that become addicted to it. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about an individual, that could become, feeling entitled to a handout. It could be a state that feels entitled to this funding, this spending. And, those are things that I think that certainly Republicans need to be looking at, that we need to be addressing. And I don't expect that we're going to do, to get the ship to do a 180 tomorrow. But what I think is it's always a good time to begin the conversation. And when you, when you run for office, one of the things that people nationally when they run for office say, vote for me, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do A, B, and C things. And if Republicans say that we're going to create jobs and we're going to lower taxes, and I always kind of I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. I enjoy creating jobs. But that's predicated off demand with my business. I have an assisted living, so if people don't want to come and live there, it's going to be difficult for me to create jobs. I think that the biggest job creators are the entrepreneurs, the business owners, the citizens. What government can do is try to help with the framework. We can help with infrastructure. We can work with tax policy. But it really comes to creating jobs. Government's about as responsible for some of those jobs as storks are for babies. I look at my business, and, I think over the 14 years that I've been in business, I don't know that I would give too much credit to government for any jobs that I've created or any growth that I've had in my business.
Yeah, exactly.
I give the majority of that to my coworkers.
Mm-hmm. I just have a text message here. I've got a couple of them. Somebody writes, why do you think Puerto Rico wants to become a state? And just off the top of my head, I mean, you look at Puerto Rico, the bond trouble they got into, they want to become a state so that they can receive more than they produce. I mean, I think that's what this listener that just texted me is getting at. I mean, so it's a problem.
And again, it doesn't make your life easier in the short term. Yes. And that's the problem. That's what I think the Republican Party are, that's what we need to be fighting, is it's not about, immediate gratification. It's about long-term solutions. And if you think that government is going to solve the problem, it's been my experience, and I, kind of look at the arc of history and say that, certainly there have been problems and challenges that government has been able to address and solve, if not solve, and, make a big dent in. But there's been so many things that we've not come anywhere close to solving. If anything, we've just kind of propped it up and enabled it, and it's just kind of continued to grow and grow and grow. And, I look and say, there's this continual war on poverty. And I think, well, are we making any headway on that war?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It seems to me that there's just a growing number and, more and more people. And, there are good people that are hard workers that fall on hard times and are, they're looking for a hand up and not a handout. And I love that. And I appreciate that. And I'm happy to help people. But there's certainly people out there that, they've got a roof over their head and a TV to watch and something in the refrigerator. They're not going to really, aspire to go much past that.
Yeah.
And, it's just something that it's not just entitlement programs. It's so many other things. And I think that's something that, as a Republican, that I want to, that I enjoy visiting about is, Republicans, our credos kind of, kind of be first responsibility. You're responsible for doing for you what you're able to do. And if you're disabled or, any disability that, society will step in and work to help you out. But for those of us that are able to work, there's that expectation that you do that and that you live within your means. And, these are personal responsibilities and not government responsibilities. And if you look at the federal level and some of the kind of the debacle that's going on with the repeal and the replace of the Obamacare. I think it's one of the things that when I campaigned against the private option that was very concerning to me was knowing that if you expand this entitlement program to this whole new demographic of people, which was able-bodied working-age adults, where traditionally Medicaid served children, the elderly, the disabled, and pregnant women. And then we expanded it to this whole new class of people. And I knew that the longer that we had it, boy, the tougher it's going to be to get rid of, because once people kind of become used to having something, it's difficult to take it away. And I think that I see part of our party, trying to distance himself from Obamacare and embrace it at the same time. And I kind of sit there and shake my head. I was like, well, how's that going to work?
Yeah, and it's worked out terribly so far.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that we need to be very conscious of as a party, that it's hard to kind of straddle the line on this, that government doesn't need to be in healthcare, but we need to make sure that everybody's getting, that we're providing it for everybody. Well, how you're going to do that without having, increased government involvement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then once you get into healthcare, the whole thing, it just perpetuates, and we get accustomed to a certain, relationship between citizen and government, and then, then of course, private sector gets squeezed even more. I mean, it's just a vicious cycle. Senator Scott Flippo, I appreciate you coming on, sir. Very good. I love it. Big picture conservatism. Really good conversation. I'd like to expand on it next time. Because this is stuff that I think the listening audience, I find it fascinating. So I really appreciate your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to be on and visit with you all this afternoon, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.
All righty. All right, Senator Scott Flippo, everybody. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back, though, in just a minute. Don't go anywhere.